if you are new, welcome. Okay, for today's video, I'm going to be telling you a story about a seemingly normal married couple that had, I was going to say slight, very different ideas of how their Valentine's Day was gonna go. Before I get into it, if you haven't already, hit subscribe. You know where it is. So, like I said, it's Valentine's Day. And a man called Richard and his wife called Stacy have made plans. Okay, Richard Schoek is a 46-year-old man who was described by his friends as a very outgoing, very friendly man. Like he'd never want anybody to feel left out. He'd always make sure everyone knew what the plans were, just he liked to make sure everybody felt included. And Stacy was the head administrator of a large medical and surgical practice. She was the main breadwinner of the family. Well, the only breadwinner of the family, because Richard was a stay-at-home dad. Richard was actually Stacy's 5th husband, and she had 2 sons from one of her previous marriages. Richard then adopted the 2 sons and raised them as his own. As it was Valentine's Day, Richard had planned a dinner for him and Stacy, and also Stacy's grandparents. Her grandparents were at the age where they couldn't really be left alone, like they needed someone around constantly, so that's why they were also involved in the plans. And Stacy had planned for them to exchange gifts at a nearby park. I don't know what she said to Richard to make it seem like this was like a normal thing, because unless it was just like a normal thing, I doubt it. Anyway, I don't know what she said to him to make it so that he would be like, okay, let's exchange gifts at the park. She told him to meet him there because she was held up at work. So he drove to the park on his own. Now, it's a very secluded park. There's nothing but a dirt track and some trees. There's no street lights. It doesn't seem like a very used park, if you get what I mean. It doesn't have a set path. There's no benches. It's just some dirt and some trees. Richard's been waiting there for about 30 minutes before Stacy finally arrives. When she got there, she noticed that Richard's car was still running, headlights on, and the driver's door is open. And then her eyes drop to the ground, because just outside of the driver's door is Richard laying on the floor, surrounded by blood. Richard had been shot 5 times. He took 2 shots to the abdomen, 1 to the chest, and 2 to the face. This was described as overkill, because when Lieutenant Dan Franklin arrived at the scene, one of the first things he said was, "This is too over the top to be random." One thing that was very clear to them from the start was that this wasn't a robbery, because he still had his watch, his wedding ring, and his wallet still with him. And not to mention his car that's still running, the keys are in the engine, that's still there. So clearly this wasn't just some random person wanting his goods. At first they couldn't seem to find anything at the scene to point them in the direction of who could have possibly done this. That was until they noticed the cruiser's headlights were shining on something pretty useful. Tire tracks. They could tell from these tracks that the person that did this was definitely there before Richard even arrived. They tried everything to try and find out what type of tire marks these were. They asked in tire shops, local garages, they even went to Walmart, just anywhere that would sell tires. Eventually, after their seemingly long search, they were able to determine that the type of tire was a Goodyear Integrity. Now the questioning begins. And the first person they questioned was actually Stacy. But this wasn't for no reason, because on the night of the murder, she made a very unexpected admission. She told the investigators that she was actually having an affair with a man called Juan Reyes. She was apparently so into this guy that she hired him at her practice, despite him not having any qualifications, any training, any experience whatsoever. She hired him at her medical and surgical practice. What? Is that allowed? I don't think so. They obviously asked her if she thought that there was any way he could have anything to do with this, and she just responded, I don't know. Juan is now the primary suspect. While they were questioning him, they found out that not only did she hire him at her practice, she was also paying for his phone, his car, paying for all of the little romantic getaways they were going on, and he was even living in a house that was owned by Stacy and Richard. He was paying rent, but I mean, still. And then to add to this, Stacy also owned an apartment that her and Juan would use to do their thing. He's asked to do a polygraph test and he agrees because he's obviously denying that he's had anything to do with this, but everything comes back inconclusive. And then as the questioning continues, he ends up telling them that he was actually just using Stacy and he was more interested in just making things up with his ex-wife. As I said, he was obviously denying any sort of involvement in the murder, saying that he was eating dinner at about 7:30 and then in bed by 10:30. Obviously, he could have just made that up on the spot, so they needed someone to verify if that was what he was actually doing. So they brought in his ex-wife, the one that he's trying to, rekindle things with, and her story matched his, saying that he was eating dinner about 7:30 and in bed by about 10:30. So with this, and also the polygraph test coming back inconclusive, Juan is now ruled out as a suspect. So now they're back to square one. They don't have a suspect, and to them, it's kind of going cold. They don't have anything to go off of. All they know is the tire marks at Goodyear Integrity, and now they just know that Stacy was having an affair. That's all they have at this point. That was until the investigators get a call from the IT technician at the spinal clinic where Stacy worked. They told the investigators that the activity on Stacy's email account leading up to the night of the murder was quite odd, suspicious, if you will. There were around 4,000 emails on her account, but there were two in particular that stood out. She transferred one of her co-workers, called Lenitra Ross, $10,000. So now someone else has been brought into this. They now question Lenitra Ross. She told the investigators that she was originally given $8,900, and then on the Friday before the murder, she was then transferred another $1,100. Obviously, they asked her why Stacy was suddenly sending her $10,000, and her response was just that she was using the money to make repairs on a house she was renting from Stacy. How many houses does Stacy own? It looks suspicious, but they don't have any other evidence that would prove that it wasn't just used for repairs. So again, they're left with not much to go on until another clue is presented in front of the investigators. This time it came from a woman called Connie Hearn, who was Stacy's cousin. She told them that their grandparents, obviously because, they can't drive now, asked Stacy to sell their car, but instead Stacy didn't, and it just stayed on her driveway. That was until the night of the murder. The investigators searched for the car, and guess where they found it? At Lenitra Ross's house. It even had Goodyear Integrity tires, same ones that left the marks at the scene. This is still not enough evidence yet, apparently. So now the investigators are collecting data from a nearby cell phone tower close to the park, and were able to match a phone number that called someone that's in Stacy's phone called Mr. Results on the night of the murder. His real name was actually Reginald Coleman, and he's the significant other of, you guessed it, Lenitra Ross. Things are starting to heat up over here, and now they have enough evidence. They wanted to make the arrests at the same time so that, none of them, the three suspects here, none of them could tip off the other one to be like, they got him, run. So they arrested Reginald first, and then got Lenitra at a stoplight. And then last but certainly not least, they go to Stacy's office and arrest her there. Quite the scene at the workplace. Can you imagine working there and then just being like, they just arrested my boss. The murder. While they were being interrogated, both Reginald and Lenitra both played dumb. They were acting as if they had no idea what they were talking about. Stacey confesses straight away. She told the investigators that she hired someone to kill Richard because he was supposedly molesting her sons, but then took that back. She was like, oh wait, no, that's not true. Let me not lie here, that's not true. That's quite the thing to say. She later revealed that the real reason she wanted him dead was because she actually wanted a divorce, but was scared that she would lose custody of her sons. Now, you are their blood mother. Richard adopted them. So what was actually going on at home for you to think that you would lose custody of them? Like, what was happening? As an outcome, Stacey, Reginald and Lenitra all got what they deserved. Both Stacey and Reginald pleaded guilty and were convicted with malice murder, whereas Lenitra went to trial because she was still adamant that I had nothing to do with this, but then was also convicted of the same thing, meaning that all three of these people will spend the rest of their lives behind bars with no chance of parole. Justice was served. I want to know, why did she think she was going to lose custody? What was happening? Or was she just being really, really paranoid? But then, like, about what? Anyway, I'm just glad that they all got what they deserved. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week with a brand new true crime story. Bye!